Hey, good morning, everybody. It's Brian. Hope you're doing well today. It's Tuesday, the 27th of October. You're just going to do a quick update for Forex, and then I'll be back in about an hour to go through futures. For Forex, all we're doing, super simple, looking for possibilities of a morning breakout. So US session is starting here in just about 5 minutes. And what we'll be doing is, as the new session begins, we're going to look at the currency strength index, see how things are going, what currencies are moving, if any, which are strong, which are weak, so which are being bought, which are being sold, and then we'll pair those against one another, and that'll give us the opportunity to see if we have movement for a potential breakout. Now, maybe we do, maybe we don't. Maybe things are setting up a certain way coming into the new session, and they totally reverse. That's the beauty of breakouts. We can set it at the beginning of the session, put the breakout on, based on the data that we have up to this point. If it totally reverses and goes the other direction at the beginning of the session, breakout never fills, we cancel the trade, move on, come back in another day. That's actually what happened to us yesterday. We were looking at breakouts on a couple of different potential pairings, and market had a nice trend coming into the US session. US session started, market went the total opposite direction. That's okay. Breakouts weren't filled, no trades on, no harm, no foul. All right, so let's have a quick look at it. Here's what we're gonna be checking out this morning. Well, first thing is news. Always check news before you begin trading for the day. Not so that you can trade the news, but so that you can not trade during high volatility events. And all we're really looking for here is just doing a quick check to see if there's any red reports, any high impact news announcements that are coming up that we should be aware of that might potentially cause a big whip in the market, or cause our spreads to widen considerably, where it might slip us out of a position or put us into a position that we don't really need to be in. So we don't, we like volatility when we're trading, but we don't need to create extra work for ourselves and take extra risk around trading right into a news event. So what I like to do is just know when the news is occurring, so that I can then take the action to avoid the market if we need to, so that we don't get into a situation where we don't need to be, right? All right, so let's have a look over here. What is going on with our currency strength? So, okay, Skype, thank you, dismiss. So over here, having a look at currency strength, we can see that we really don't have a whole lot to choose from. Most of our currencies have been pretty flat. And if we go over, well, I don't get why that screen's not refreshing. This should be showing us, on my screen, we're just seeing the currency pairs, but I think you might still be seeing an old image. Well, anyway, looks like some technical difficulties around that today. For some reason, that what's being broadcast isn't updating properly. But ultimately, looking at the currency strength index here, we can see that most of our currencies are fairly flat. We can see that we just don't really have anything that's definitively strong and definitively weak. Back here earlier in the day, probably some nice divergence between the yen and the euro down here, right? But as we're coming into this new session, US session actually just started just a moment ago, not really seeing anything that's just jumping off the page at us. As a matter of fact, if we look through here, we see that most of the currency pairings that are typically pretty volatile haven't moved very much at all. We're talking like fractions of what their typical ranges would be, all of them across the board. And that's evident here when we see that everything is pretty much flat. As far as what's standing out to us right now, the only one that really, I guess there's two that really seem to have a potential here, would be maybe this CAD versus the USD. The CAD versus the USD has been in a nice downward movement leading up to this morning, the start of the new session. So the CAD versus the USD, or US CAD is the actual pairing. But the CAD is stronger currency. USD certainly is a weaker currency here. The other that's typically fairly volatile Actually, we've got some divergence between, if we're looking at that, the pound and the USD as well. So the pound being a stronger currency, the USD being a weaker currency as well. And if we have a look at that on the regular session over here, we can see that the pound, let's see if we can pull this up here. We can see that the pound, and I actually put on a breakout trade at the top of this box over here. The pound's only moved 50 pips for the day, and its average is typically into the hundreds, 15, 120, and we've got a nice upward motion leading up to that. So that really supports the buying activity that we're seeing on the pound versus the USD as we see this little burst of divergence starting off with the new session. So I went ahead and I put a breakout trade on for the pound versus the USD. It looks like the pound's being a little more, has a little buying activity behind it versus the USD, which is being sold off. So we'll see if that continues on. Of course, as always, just a quick reminder, I'm not telling you what to trade. I'm not telling you to go take this trade. You can see that was a trade I clicked on and that I took, but that doesn't mean that it's necessarily right for you. You have to examine your own parameters and your own risk tolerance and everything else to take that trade. But that's why we took it. We're looking at the pound versus the USD here. If it clicks in, if it moves past the top of that breakout box, we'll be in a trade, and we'll see where that goes from there. Obviously, no one can predict the outcome of it. We just set up what we can leading up to that moment. All right, so that's it. I think we've been through the process. We've talked about what we're looking at, and potentially have a trade on if it moves far enough to touch us into that breakout. All right, so that's it. I'll be back in about an hour with the future stuff as well.